Hello, everyone. I'm Jared Dashevsky, founder, creator of Healthcare Huddle. Welcome to Class 9, Discharge Planning and Signing Out. This class is in partnership with Doximity. We're approaching the end. This is the second to last class. We're approaching the end of shift. We're getting things in order, getting discharge plans in order, signing out to the night team. This is an important class, so pay attention. And if you recall, a couple classes ago, I kind of talked about discharge planning, specifically something called transitions of care. And do you recall what I said about transitions of care? They are the most dangerous thing we do as physicians, because we have a patient in the inpatient setting who is on a monitor. We are giving them their meds. We're drawing blood. We're drawing labs. We can see them at any second if they have a complaint or they start decompensating, right? They're in such a controlled environment. And when we discharge them, we're sending them out. Whether they're going to a subacute rehab or back home, we have no idea what's going to happen there, right? We give the recommendations, we order the medications to the pharmacy. Do we know if the patient or the family member will pick up those medications? We have no idea, right? So there's a lot of things that are outside of our control when it comes to transitions of care, especially discharging patients. So as physicians, the one thing we can do to ensure this is a safer process is focusing on what's in our control. Okay? So I'll first talk about discharge planning and then signing out. As an intern, what you'll probably be doing most when it comes to discharge planning is the discharge summary. Okay? But if you want to excel as an intern, you should always be thinking about the disposition for the patient. Why is this patient here? What is keeping them here? How long do they need to be here for? And where are they going to go? Are they going back home? Are they going to a rehab? And why is this important? Well, the hospital is a system, and patients flow in and out. And when patients aren't flowing out, what ends up happening is that they end up staying in the emergency department, boarding for what we call boarding for an inpatient bed. Okay, so let me just quickly map out the process because you need to visualize this. But patient is in the home setting. They arrive to the ED, the emergency department. The emergency department decides, is this patient going home? Are they going to be disposed home? Or are they going to be admitted? Okay, there's two options there. Okay, and if they're going to be admitted, they sign the orders and they say send them upstairs, whether that be to a medicine floor, a med surg unit, the ICU, etc. So if they're admitted, the next question is there a bed? Is there a bed available? And if there's no bed available, the patient's board in the ED. And the word boarding, or the term boarding, just means you sit around in the ED on a stretcher. The primary team is upstairs, the inpatient medicine team or the inpatient surgery team. They're upstairs, and they have to come down to see you, right? The frontline provider is not at the front lines. They're upstairs, but you don't have a bed. So you just have to wait there until a bed opens up. And so if a bed opens up, then you move to the inpatient floor, you get treated, and then are you ready for dispo? Right? Oh, you can't even see this. How do I move my face? Are you ready to go home or to go to the STAR? And that brings the next question. Are they going to a facility or are they going home? And if they're going home, that's that. You could just discharge them and they go home. But if they're going to a facility, the question is, again, is there a bed at the facility? And if there's no bed at the facility, then you just go through the cycle of waiting for a bed. And then everything gets backed up to where the patient's now boarding. Okay? The most streamlined process is basically this route where the patient goes home. Right? So while this is out of our control, whether there's a bed at the facility, but what's in our control is this part, right, when the patient's going home. So we can prepare everything beforehand to really streamline this process of getting the patient home. Okay? And even start moving the process forward for getting the patient to a facility. Okay? But this is why discharge planning is important, because if you're not thinking about discharge, you get lazy, the patients stay longer than they need to, and then the emergency department becomes flooded with patients and it becomes an absolute zoo. It is not safe for anyone. So I created, or what I use in residency, is this discharge checklist. And I've written about this in prior Healthcare Huddle articles. Okay? So I write this checklist somewhere, whether it's in the EHR, in a note, at the bottom of my progress note, and I'm constantly thinking about it every day. So the first aspect is, what are the barriers to discharge, right? Is it like a home health aide? Does the patient not have help at home? Is it a bed at a STAR? Right? Like, what is keeping them here? Is it finishing up antibiotics? Is it a PT evaluation? Right? Always be thinking about it. And I'll give it a little check if I thought about it. Social work needs, right? You should always be talking to social work when it comes to discharging a patient, because if they do need home health aid, if they're going to a SNF or a STAR, they're helping you with all that. And they're communicating with you, hey, make sure you pen a discharge summary. And that's what I talked about in a couple classes ago. Physical therapy, patients, especially older patients, should always have a physical therapy evaluation to see, can they go at home? Can they be at home alone? Can they be at home with help? Do they need any mobility equipment? Okay? You don't want a patient to medically be ready to go home, but no one's evaluated them for like their physical fitness, right? Older patients, 65 and older, the amount of muscle mass they lose per day just sitting in bed in the hospital is absurd. I think it's like 3% per day of muscle mass. So a patient who's admitted for community-acquired pneumonia, who's in the hospital for 5 days, they're going to be very frail if they've just been sitting around and not working with physical therapy. Okay, so they may need to go to a subacute rehab for a couple of weeks. So always make sure the physical therapy recs or the physical therapy orders are early in the hospitalization. Nutrition recs, patients who are going to SAR or who are getting enteral feeds, like through an NG tube or a PEG tube, right? They're going to need a nutrition recommendation that you include in the discharge summary for the facility. Is the patient chronically bedbound, and do they have wounds and wound care saw them? What were their recs, right? So make sure those recs are in. What is the pharmacy? The patient going home, don't ask them for what their pharmacy is on the day of discharge, right? You want to know the pharmacy a day or two before discharge. You want to send the discharge medications there. That way someone can pick them up so that when the patient goes home, the medications are already in the house. All right. And this is also like the med rec. Doing a discharge med rec is, of course, so important. And then outpatient follow-ups. Every patient should be seeing their primary care provider 2 to 3 weeks after discharge, right? Those quick touch points are very helpful. And as someone who works in the inpatient setting and works in the outpatient setting as a primary care doctor, it's so valuable to have a patient see me shortly after discharge. I can review their medications and I can make sure they have all their follow-ups scheduled, okay? And additionally, for follow-ups, if they need a specialty follow-up with cardiology, don't wait until the day of discharge to reach out to someone to ask to schedule an appointment. Do it as soon as you know that they need a follow-up. And this is because when the after visit summary is printed for the patient, all of their medications that they're prescribed, new medications that have been discontinued, and follow-up visits, it's all on the pamphlet. So if you schedule a follow-up visit after the patient is discharged, then they're not going to see it. And some patients use that after visit summary like it's the Bible, and they follow everything that's on their after visit summary as they should. So if they don't see a cardiology appointment that's 3 weeks away, they're not going to go. Okay? So make sure outpatient follow-ups are scheduled way before discharge. And then going back to my class on family and caregiver updates, make sure you're transparent. Make sure you tell the family and the caregivers that we think this patient will be discharged in 1 to 2 days. You don't want the patient to be ready for discharge today, and then you call the family member and you say, hey, patient is ready for discharge. We're going to send them home today. You can't do that because the family member needs to be there and maybe they're working. Okay? So I find this checklist highly valuable, right? And as an intern, you'll be doing a lot of note writing, as I said, okay? Don't think too hard, right? Because for the discharge summary, you're going to need to write a summary of the hospital course and what the next steps are. This takes a lot of mental energy. When I was an intern, we didn't have generative AI tools like Doximity Ask to help us, but writing a discharge summary is not, I can't find ways in which it's helpful for us physicians. I think it just eats up time, but it's very, very, very beneficial for patients and the primary care provider who's going to be seeing the patient in the outpatient setting. So let's go back to Doximity. If you recall, you're able to create templates for Doximity, and I have a discharge summary template. Using the information provided, provide a discharge summary in this format: brief HPI, hospital course, incidental findings. Okay, so let's use our John Smith example, who we've been using, who was admitted for dyspnea and orthopnea in the setting of missed dialysis. We're going to input his note here that was AI generated, and all I'm going to do is click enter. I'm not even going to write a prompt because the prompt is already here in the instructions, right? And within a couple seconds, we have the discharge summary by problem, and this is a discharge summary based off of the problem list. So what happened for the acute hypoxic respiratory failure? They improved. What the next steps are for hyperkalemia, it improved. Hyperphosphatemia, right? Like all the problems that we addressed. Okay, and most importantly, and this is why I think these models are fantastic for discharge summaries, because it writes out incidental findings, right? As a PCP, nodule that was found on CT chest during the inpatient hospital admission, right? If it's not listed here as an incidental finding in the discharge summary, I may miss it as the primary care provider, and all of a sudden, this patient goes years without getting a lung nodule re-examined, and it could be cancer. So these incidental findings are perfect. So this is just the discharge summary, but let's say, the patient was just hospitalized for a prolonged period of time. Do they actually know what happened? Oftentimes they don't, right? Because they take a very passive approach and they just let the doctors do their thing. So I also have this patient discharge summary template where I copy the formal discharge summary and I paste it into here, into a patient-friendly version, and I have my prompt also write for me a colleague-to-colleague handoff so that I can fax this over to the PCP, right? So let's see. So this is the patient-friendly discharge summary. And it's written at a elementary school level. You came to the hospital because you had trouble breathing. It doesn't say, like it said in the discharge summary, you came to the hospital because you were dyspneic, right? So a beautifully written patient-friendly discharge summary. And then we have the handoff letter to the primary care physician. Dear colleague, and this is more a lot of medicalese, what needs to be followed up on, and here's how you could reach out to me. And what I learned a couple classes ago, you can fax this or text this so you could fax this to the primary care provider, or you can text the discharge summary to patient-friendly discharge summary to the patient or to the family member. And I think it's great. It's streamlined. Okay. So that's the discharge summary. That's discharge planning. I think I hammered home the main points. So now let's talk about sign out. And for sign out, let's go back to, let's see if I still have it written. Yeah. Oh no. Do we have it? So basically you use the SPAR method again for sign out. So this was like situation, background, assessment, and the R was like the reason for consult or something. But you could use the same strategy for sign out to appear. I will say, sign out at first will be very long, but as you get more efficient, it should be no longer than 10 minutes, honestly. Especially when you as an intern get good at dealing with problems. So sign out should be very to the point. This is, let's go back to our patient examples. All right, so this is literally how sign out goes. All right, we have Jardashevsky, 30-year-old male here for CAP, AMS. Nothing happened during the day, to do overnight. That's how short the sign out should be for him. For Daraj Dash, 80-year-old male, Dinar DNI, he's here for missed dialysis, has been on BiPAP, getting Lasix 80. Main thing to do overnight is just to recheck the urine output, and if it's less than 1 liter, redose late 680. Okay, if then, right? That's an if then statement. If there's nothing to sign out, just say nothing to do. Deborah Smith, 98-year-old male with SLE, prolonged steroid use, here for osteoporosis complicated by AFib RVR. During the day, she's been in a normal sinus rhythm, no episodes of AFib RVR, nothing to do overnight. If another episode of AFib RVR and it's persistent, give Lopressor 2.5 milligram IV push, right? That's an if-then statement. But that's how short each sign out should be. I remember I was working with, or I was cross-covering an intern, and they started talking in regards to like day events, right? They started highlighting the med rec they did. And I jumped in because it was 8:15 and I just want to get home. And I said, no need to talk about the med rec. That is not at all important for the night team to know. They do not need to know that the med rec was completed, right? So make sure everything you say in sign out should be high, very, very high yield. And again, very quickly, an intern will know how to treat hypotension. So you don't need to say, if patient is hypotensive, give fluids. That is just like basic plan or basic knowledge for a resident, right? If patients are already on antibiotics and they fever, you don't need to say broaden antibiotics. It's basic knowledge that if a patient is fevering through antibiotics, something's not being covered, so broaden from cefepime to Zosyn, something like that, right? So sign out should be short, sweet, no longer than 10 to 15 minutes. And by the time you're a resident signing out, it should be no longer than 5 minutes. And that's really it. That's the end of the day. So after you sign out, turn off your phone, turn off your work phone, forward your chats to the night intern, and take time to decompress. Unfortunately for me, I live very close to my hospital. So I only have 2 minutes to really take a breather. But if you commute, that is a blessing, because you have time to listen to music, listen to a podcast, call friends, call family, and decompress. Next year, I'll be working. My commute will be through Central Park, so I'll be able to walk through Central Park and decompress that way. And you'll see, you'll need it, especially after a very long and busy day. All right, so that's class 9, discharge planning and signing out. Congrats, you finished all of the main classes, and in the next class, we'll wrap everything up.